helps us understand something about what Trinity is and how Trinity exists. But I got to tell you, this is a really hard concept to wrap your brain around. How does it make sense that you have one whole person who is the Father, and one whole person who is Jesus, one whole person is the Holy Spirit, that together make one whole person, not three people? Does that make sense? I mean, all right, so we've got three people here. Now, if I were to scrunch you together really, really tight, and bind you up, you'd still be three people, right? You wouldn't become one person. So that doesn't make sense to me. The theological math is tough. So then I want to think, okay, so if God is one God and we have three persons, maybe that means that the Father is 1/3 of God, and Jesus is 1/3 of God, and the Holy Spirit is 1/3 of God, because 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 equals 1. But that doesn't work either, because the Father is fully God, and the Son is fully God, and the Spirit is fully God. And so you can't have a third, and a third, because it's 1 and 1 and 1. And you can't have 1 and 1 and 1 equal 3, because 1 and 1 and 1 has to equal 1. And this one isn't any bigger than the other 3 ones that are there. And it doesn't make any sense. People have been tripping up over how to understand Trinity for forever. And whenever anybody tries to talk about it, whenever anybody tries to define Trinity, we're always better at saying what Trinity isn't rather than saying what Trinity is, because it's so hard to understand. The theological math doesn't work in a logical framework. It doesn't. And so, whichever way you go to talk about it, you wind up getting into some kind of a heresy. And heresy is a serious deal. You don't want to be wrapped up in heresy. So one of the brilliant ways that was used to describe Trinity. Now I understand, Greg, that your wife Melissa will be teaching Dante next year. All right. So she's really excited about this. As an AP English teacher, she gets to spend a lot of time talking to her kids about hell. And she thinks that they're going to really dig that. But at the end of Dante's, Inferno, you get to climb up into heaven. And there Dante writes about these 3 distinct yet indistinguishable lights kind of circling. And so if you were to imagine that you have a red and a blue and a yellow, the 3 primary colors, and they're spinning together. As soon as you imagine them as 3 separate lights, you've imagined a heresy, because God is one God. But as soon as you imagine them as 3 blended lights to make one color, you've imagined a heresy, because you have blended all the persons of Trinity together into one. It's so hard to figure out. So one of the ways that people try to get at this, so let's not think about the math element of it. Let's think about something else. What if we were to think about Father, Son, and Holy Spirit instead in terms of their primary job? What it is that we think about the Father doing, what we think about the Son doing, what we think about the Spirit doing. Let's give that a shot and see where we go with it. All right, so we imagine the Father being the one most responsible for creation, right? So let's just say that the Father is a creator. And then Jesus, we think about him in terms of salvation or redemption, right? And so he's the Redeemer. And then the Holy Spirit, who, as we said in the Nicene Creed, is the Lord and giver of life, is this one who sustains all things. So the sustainer. And this one's got some real traction in the church. You'll hear frequently on Trinity Sunday. And we actually had it in our prayer earlier. This idea of God being creator, redeemer, sustainer. Anybody like that? Yeah? Anybody think that that's a heresy too? It is. It's a heresy called modalism, where you take the persons of the Trinity and you just identify them by what they do rather than who they are. They just fill into different modes or different roles, and you can't have that either. Isn't that right, oh theological student? It is right. Yeah, I'm pointing back to Samuel because he's our theological student. So, we are better at saying what Trinity isn't than we are at saying what Trinity is. So, if we can't do it the mathematical way, and if we can't really do it through the role that each person of the Godhead fills, maybe we ought to just stick with the language of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But boy, there's a problem with that there, isn't there? It's biblical. That's there in the Bible, but my goodness, when you start assigning gender to God, the assigning of gender to God is, you can't overstate this. It has been great for mankind. It has not been great for womankind. It has been the backbone of why men were considered to be the rulers of nations, the rulers of households, the ones who are in charge of everything, the only ones who could own stuff. And early, before women had the right to vote, you had to be a white male in America. You had to own property in order to be able to vote. And if you didn't own property and you were female and you couldn't own property, then you couldn't vote. It created the backbone of a paternalistic society. Then you've also got the problem of some people having fathers that weren't very good. And so if they're trying to think about God as a father, there might be just too much baggage to really lock in to the loving grace of who God the Father is. It seems that no matter how we try to think about Trinity, we're always going to come up short. And how could it be any other way? I think that we will always come up short whenever we try to really dig into this idea of who God is. We're always going to come up short. Because located in this noggin of yours, in yours, yeah, well, in everybody's, but I'm going to pick on you now because your sister got a lot of attention today, so it's your turn. Okay? All right. Take your hands, go like this. Okay? That, my friend, is the size of your brain. Yeah. If you were to shove it up inside your head, it would fit right up in there like that. Okay? And that's all the brain you have. That's the whole thing. Sometimes you eat fried food. Right? So your brain, and sometimes you eat ice cream. Sometimes you have Pop-Tarts. And sometimes you have candy. Yep. And do you always eat the stuff that you're supposed to eat? Do you eat broccoli and asparagus and Brussels sprouts every day? You do? Is he good about that? Yeah. Well, I tell you, even if you fed your brain all the perfect foods, your brain can't think every possible thought that ever exists. Can it? No, it really can't. It really can't. So there's no way for a brain the size of 2 fists that fits within one skull that has sometimes been fed ice cream and Cheetos. There's no way for that brain to understand the fullness of God. We can't. We just can't. Some things you just have to accept by faith. You can't, if you overthink it, you're in trouble. Right? Well, I'm going to continue overthinking if it's all right with you. Because I want to talk about a way of thinking about Trinity that I think is really very helpful. And that's thinking about Trinity in the way that it was presented in our gospel reading. See, in our gospel reading, you had all 3 persons of the Trinity present. You had Jesus as he was talking to his disciples. And he says that the Spirit is going to come and he's going to teach you things. The Spirit of truth will lead you into all truth. He will tell you everything that you need to know, and everything that he knows because I know it, and because the Father knows it. And everything that I possess, the Spirit possesses because it was given to me by the Father. And so Father, Son, and Spirit, in how Jesus is presenting this, know everything. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, in how Jesus present this, possess everything. Everything that ever was, everything that is, anything that will be is God's. All right, your turn. You two. All right, watch out. You're getting warning. Do you have things that your brother wants? And does your brother sometimes take them? And when your brother sometimes takes these things, are you happy about it? You are not. And is the same thing true for you? Do you have things that your brother wants? And does he sometimes take them? Does he sometimes take them because you took something and now you're taking each other's things and then you're fighting? Does that sometimes happen? Because that never happens in my house. Never. Ever. Can you imagine the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit owning everything and never fighting over it? Never saying, give me that, that's mine. No, that's mine. No, that's mine. No, that's mine. Can you imagine that? Isn't that the kind of household, though, that your mom and dad want to have? I think it is. By the way, can I borrow your bike? Sure. All right, great. And then, so one of the great things one of the beautiful things that's true about God is that God doesn't, there's no internal conflict with God. God's priority, Father's priority, Son's priority, Spirit's priority is all the same. There's no, well, let's do this first. No, let's do this. That just doesn't happen within God. God's relationship within God's self is so perfectly balanced. Everything is shared. Everything is known. There's no miscommunication that never happens in a relationship. Right, Mariah? Is there ever any miscommunication that happens in your relationships? Like, do we ever miscommunicate? Yeah, sometimes we do. There's no miscommunication in the relationship between Father, Son, and Spirit. It's all of a piece, and there's no separation. It's perfectly balanced. And I think that what it means to be made in the image of God isn't to be made, it isn't so much to do with gender or with our body type or anything like that. It isn't so much to do with that as much as it is that we desire to be in relationship with other people. We're made in the image of a God who is social, who has this perfect relationship within God's self, and we want then to seek relationships our own self. And the relationships that we want to have relationships like that which is shared within the Godhead. We want to have perfectly balanced relationships. We want where people are perfectly understood, where there is perfect communication and perfectly shared goals and no conflict whatsoever. We want that. Do we have that? Anybody raise your hand? Anyone? Steve's looking at Sharon. Sharon's looking at Steve. Anyone? To be made in God's image, I believe, is to desire and want that kind of a relationship. Imagine if we could bind our relationships together with love. Imagine if we had the kind of relationships in industry where we had shared priorities, not competitive ones. Imagine if we had kind of relationships between nations where we had shared priorities rather than ones that benefit me or ones that benefit you that run into conflict. Imagine if we had the kind of shared relationships where our pursuit was always for the good well-being of all. That's who God is, and that's what God desires. And I believe to be a follower of God means that sometimes we have to let go of some of these boundaries that we've created in order to love beyond those boundaries and embrace the fullness of who God is and God's love. Now, none of that sermon had anything to do with the movie Grease, did it? So, if all of that went, or a whole bunch of it did, then read the title of the sermon, because that might stick a little better. Did you guys see the title of the sermon? This was like one of the most fun titles of a sermon that I ever had. Cynthia? You don't get it? We go together like Rama, Lama, Lama, ka-dinga, da-dinga, dong. We go together like Rama, Lama, Lama, ka-dinga, da-dinga, dong. Come on, do it with me. Y'all want to. We go together like Rama, Lama, Lama, ka-dinga, da-dinga, dong. I don't hear you singing, Steve. And you're in the choir. Come on, help me out here. We go together like Rama, Lama, Lama, ka-dinga, da-dinga, dong. Together forever like shoo-bop, shoo-bop-a-lot, Rama, Lama, ding-dong. Chang, chang, chang-a-da-chang, cha-bop. That's the way it should be. Wow! Thanks. Sometimes music can communicate things that brains can't. Isn't that right, Greg? Greg's looking at me like, what did he just do? I just loved the idea. Father, Son, and Spirit going together like nothing you ever heard of before. Together forever. Perfectly balanced. In the name of the Son and the Spirit and the Father. Amen.